the recording on Zoom.
This meeting is being recorded. Hello. Well, this is gonna be very good. Hello. So, welcome to the second lecture of the program of the Transition Living Lab brief. This is very weird because in order to face Akino, I'm giving the back to everybody in the room. So I'm gonna quickly turn around and say hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in the middle of the rain and terrible weather. I thank you for switching off the phones. We have Dr. Akino Tahir that very kindly is connecting from Brisbane. And it's late at night there. So we are in the different times and maybe different moods. So thank you for aligning with us, Akino. And she worked in UREF, that is the section of the it's the section of working with refugees with the resilience, RDI, Resilience Development Initiative, that is a research group in Indonesia. And Akino is the international PI of the project. And she's going to talk to us about her practice and about the project and about some pilots that we run using the idea of Transition Living Lab in Indonesia. So, hello Akino, and I'll let you to introduce yourself. And you have, I don't know if you can see, but you have students from many courses of the design school, service design, design management, design for social innovation. Anyone else? Okay, Akino's gonna give a lecture, and we have time for questions at the end of her lecture. So thank you. With you, Akino.
Thank you, Malay. Good morning, everyone, and good evening to myself. I hope you have a good morning on the way to this lecture. Well, I wouldn't call this a lecture. I would just call this a sharing of experience. I hope you have a good morning so far. And for those who came earlier, a few minutes before this talk started, I hope you also had a time to read some of the excerpts of a book that a very good friend of mine wrote, I think 2 years ago. He's a refugee from Afghanistan, and he's been living in Indonesia for about 7 to 8 years now. And I think, it was a very good, I suppose, opening to this sharing of experience. My name is Akino. I'm now in Brisbane, but I'm an Indonesian. And today I'm gonna talk a little bit about maybe two parts. One is about the Envision the Transition workshop that we did in Indonesia as part of the Refugee Transition Network. And the second part is to share maybe a few projects that I did before with young refugees who are living in Indonesia for a few years already. Hold on. I'm from RDI URAF, as Malay mentioned before. So RDI is a think tank that works on resilience issues in the context of sustainable development goals. But we form a small research group that tries to look at the intersection between forced displacement and urban development in Indonesia. So that's where I come from. Now, this Envision the Transition workshop that Malay mentioned before, or that I mentioned before, is part of the Refugee Transition Network project, which is a networking project that we are doing, URAF is doing with Malay from the University of the Arts, as well as Chris from Lancaster University. I'm not sure how much you know about this project, but I'll just say that this is a sort of an experimentation ground for for us to see how the transition design framework, I'm sure you all know about that better than me, works or seen or being applied in the, if you want to look at the forced displacement as one of global problems, very complex problems that we have at the moment, and we want to sort of look at it from the UK and the Indonesian perspectives, because obviously the context is different, but also I think the main differences is that the UK is a resettlement country for many refugees around the world, and Indonesia is not, and so we call Indonesia as a transit countries, or rather a country where people will move on from to go to their resettlement countries. And so let's see what's next. So the Envision the Transition workshop in Indonesia was done in November last year, but Male and Loretta did the similar workshop in the UK, I think a few weeks or a few months before the Indonesian workshop, and there was a few differences. I think there are a few differences. I think for one, the UK workshop was smaller in terms of participants and the scale. And in Indonesia, we wanted to try to scale it up a little bit. We have, I think, 24 or 25 participants divided into 4 groups. And because of that, each group must have their own facilitators. And so we have about 8 co-facilitators from 3 different organizations. So from the UIL, we have Loretta. From URAF, we have myself and Has, my team member, who's is also joining us for the lecture today. And then we also have facilitators from the Archipelago, which is a writers collective. For those, you can just Google the Archipelago. They have a really cool writings, poems, or paintings that they posted on their websites. Mostly the writers are those in displacement at the moment. And so having facilitators from them is really cool, because they help us really kind of tailor this workshop into the language and the feel that maybe is closer to most of participants. Now, the participants in Indonesia, unlike in the UK, who are all refugees or had been refugees or was refugees before, in Indonesia we have a mixture of refugees and local Indonesians. And the reason being that we want to, in every project that URAF is doing, we want to foster interaction between refugees and Indonesians. I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Indonesia, the narrative of refugees and asylum seeking is very, very, how would I say that? It's quite negative. People are quite hostile towards refugees and asylum seekers because they don't know what's going on, and it's very far from our sort of daily issues in Indonesia. So people don't know, so they have quite a negative perspective towards refugees. And so this workshop, we have, I think, about 5 or 6 Indonesians within the participants. And the main goal of the workshop, I don't want to feel bad to say this, but I suppose the main goal is to test some methods or methodologies where we can, together, we can imagine a different future to help people kind of see, that there could be different realities, and maybe we could dream, some other kind of realities than we have at the moment. And so once you dream it, you can dream it into being, basically. But besides testing methodologies or methods, I think the workshop has also brought some values for participants. which I will talk about a little bit later at the end of this talk. Yeah. And so the next part, let me start with this. This is the sixth part of the workshop. We had a 2 days workshop at the time, and in which we sort of deliver these 6 different sessions with 6 different methods of sort of imagining the future. The introduction part, we did it with using a traditional artifact that each individuals brought to the workshop, and introduce themselves using this object. We did it in a panel, so in a big group, where everyone can hear, what they say. As well as the value mapping. The value mapping is an exercise that was done in pairs within groups, so it's smaller exercise. And then we have the Imagining Utopia Part 1 and 2 in groups of 4. And then we went to the Vision 3 and SIBAMS in a panel, so in a larger big group with everyone. And in between these sessions, we have of course, ice-breaking activities. We have hangout or just talk within small groups, and also reflections sessions, sometimes in the middle of or in between sessions, or sometimes at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. And then if you see the little bubbles in these slides, it represents those one-on-one informal conversations that people have during breaks, during lunch, or maybe when they wait for the prayers time, or even after the workshops. So yeah, besides the structured sort of workshop sessions, we also kind of open up spaces for people to have those kind of informal interaction. And then this is the first session that we have, which is an introduction using the tech artifacts. As you can see, people bring different things. Most of them bring photos or just downloaded from internet, which represents something that is very dear to their heart. One participant had this picture of someone clearing the snow in front of their house, and he said that this really looked like his childhood home and his childhood activities with his father, who are now in Afghanistan, and he is in Indonesia. And then of course there were some people who brought images of dances, traditional dances, or traditional clothes, which they heard from their parents, or they use by themselves. And food, of course, food is always there in this kind of interaction. But there's one participant who brought a picture of a coffee plants or fruits that is taken in her grandfather's coffee plantation before they were forced to flee the country. And then there is one picture of, if you can see at the bottom left, that is a natural sort of feature of Afghanistan that is not there anymore. It has been destroyed by the Taliban, but this is something that the person was really proud of, because it was attracting so much kind of pilgrims back in the days and things like that. And then besides those traditional stuffs, they also talk about themselves in a way that is very personal. For example, one person brought a quote in which for him it kind of encourages him to be vulnerable, and to say to himself that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to show yourself to people. It doesn't mean that it's a weakness. One person brought a yearbook in which he discovered his sexuality, and being a gay in a very conservative Indonesian society is a very big struggle that he had. Another person brought also a kind of these textiles, painting materials that she discovered during his darkest sort of hours in Indonesia as a refugee. So, there are different kinds of artifacts that can be traditional, can be ecological or not, but something that they choose to sort of introduce or represent themselves. And I think this is a really good session for introduction. The next session that we had after that is doing the value mapping exercise. We divided them into groups of 4, but within the groups, it's a pair doing the value mapping. We gave them prompts or questions that they need to answer and write, and later presented and used for the following session. So I think these 2 exercises in the beginning really build, that strong connection and trust between participants who may or may not know each other before the workshops. Right. The next session that we had was Imagining Utopia, in which we use blocks, play blocks for kids to imagine, the kind of society or the kind of neighborhood that they would like to have if there is no restriction on whatsoever. And so I think this is also, this was very difficult to do in the beginning. People didn't know what to do, but I'm sure like some of you may have used this method before. And people just kind of go with the flow, and I think it's good that we have facilitators that have done facilitators training one day before, because then facilitators can help them to poke them to imagine a little bit or push them to think a little bit outside of what they usually think about. So this is an example of a neighborhood that they built. It's called Diversity Neighborhood, with all the different elements that they want to put in there. And I think if you see the results from those 4 groups, it has a lot of common elements in it. So for example, something that encourages going back to nature, or some ecological restoration or something like that. And so for me, that kind of shows, that maybe we want the same thing, but somehow, some way we don't have it now. And in this exercise, we have also some mission cards to encourage participants to think about the things that cannot be visualized. For example, how do you party, or what if someone gets sick? How do you date? Where do you find your dates, or like what do you do when you're dating? And then we also have like a disruption in which we take 1 or 2 people from one group and put it in another group to kind of just interrupt the flow of the conversation and see how they cope with it. The next day we came back with the second part of the Imagining Utopia, in which we asked them to imagine a life of a young people who is living in the neighborhood that they created. What does it look like for this person in the whole day, from late evening until the next evening. And I think this is quite a difficult exercise for everyone. It's quite difficult to do or to imagine things that are not quite familiar. We see a lot of debates or discussions in this part. For example, someone wants to go to school only for 2 hours a day, and another person was like, how can you go to school only for 2 hours a day? So there's like kind of clashes or discussions on some parts, which I found quite interesting as well. And then the other 2 methods that we tried was the vision tree. So in this part, we asked participants to put on a post-it notes the things that they would like to bring from the neighborhood that they created into their current daily life. So some things like I don't know what's written in there, but like acceptance or like love. There's a lot. There's like a huge cluster of families and communities and things like that. And I think because we did it in a panel setting, it's good because then people would be able to ask for clarification if there is something unclear. And then from this exercise, we went to the last part, which is the seed bombs, which is basically a question to participants to ask them to, what is it from this workshop today that you would like to bring home with you as a reminder or as a goal or whatever that is. And some of, we provided some time for some people to share what they wrote, but I think many of them are just, write something, ask their friends or the other participants to write on the books that we gave them. And then for this one, we also created a little, cute pin to remind people that we are the change that we want to, we are the one who makes the change that we want to see in the world to be a reality. So you are a change maker, and so this is, some kind of a token of reminder for the participants of this workshop. So in terms of, that's like all 6 sessions, right? And then outside of the sessions, we have, these ice-breaking games and activities that were designed to push people a little bit outside of their comfort zone. For example, we have this on the right bottom is people massaging each other, and that is very uncomfortable for people who doesn't like to be touched or touch other people, which of course if they don't want to do it, they can, they can say that I don't want to do this. But that was also like creating, bonds between participants. We have this gratitude wall where people can just post whatever they feel during the day. And also, all this kind of like small little talks. They had a hangout on the first day of the workshop. And, some people just stay over at some participants, place during the first night. So that was quite I think that was unplanned, but interesting connection, I think. So that was the workshop itself. In terms of the goal of the workshop, which is we wanted to test some methods, as you can see here, I've kind of put like levels, what works, what doesn't work, and you can see which one works and which one doesn't work according to my opinion. I feel like, as I mentioned before, the introduction and the value mapping was really great to have that basis of trust and connection. The imagining utopia part was a little bit difficult, and I think this is something that we can experiment, repeatedly in the future in terms of finding the best way to achieve what we want to achieve in this session. The vision tree also works well. I think it brings out some of the deep discussions, for example, about religion, about gender discrimination or gender gap at workplace, for example. And then the seed bombs is something that I'm still also questioning whether this works or not, but I think this is something that we can see in time, not right after the workshops, but in time. I've already have like one participant reaching out to me yesterday. What a great timing, I think. He said he's now resettled in the States, and he told me, I told him that I was preparing for this lecture today, and I've got his picture up, and he's like, oh, that was really like a good workshop, and I have this book with me every day to remind me what I committed to do that day. So I think in terms of planting the seeds of change within one person, we can probably say it in time. Outside of method or methodology, I think I would kind of reserve my observation for the end of this this sharing. But if you would be so kind to give me like 1 minute to drink, and I'll put up for you another excerpt from the book that I really light from a friend of mine, so you can read it while I'm drinking. So just give me 1 minute. Maybe if anyone wants to share a reflection or ask questions, it's also okay at this point of time, I suppose.
Hello. Just a second. I just want to say that the actual book where she's putting these extracts is in the studio of service design. You can go and see and consult it there. Please don't take it. But if you want to see the rest of it, it's in the studio. I can bring it to the workshop for the ones that are coming in the workshop.
Okay. Shall we move forward?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The second part of this sharing of experience is to share with you some of the projects that we did in UREF, also with majority with young refugees, but some of them are sort of older or younger, but majority are within this youth group of 18 to 24 years old. I have 3 projects here that I love to share with people. One is the placemaking action research that we did in 4 years ago, and then Let's Walk My Journey art exhibition in 2022, and the youth mentorship program that we do since 2022. So it's still going on at the moment. Okay, let's start with the placemaking action research. It is a research, a small one, where I think this is our first research on young refugees at the time within UREF, within the research group. The idea or the goal is to see if placemaking, the sense of this connection to places, can encourage positive social interaction between a refugee group and the local youth group who are living in the same area or neighborhood. So just as a context for you is that in Indonesia there are 2 kinds of refugee groups, as we say it. One is the group that is supported by the UN agency IOM, International Organization for Migration, and by support I mean they provided accommodation, monthly allowance, and other kinds of facilities. They also provided like free health, basic health service, and things like that. But in exchange of that, refugees who live under the IOM support must follow the IOM regulations, which at some point of time was quite strict in terms of, for example, the time where they can go out from the accommodation. The accommodation is a gated buildings or complex, so very limited interaction with local Indonesian. It's almost like a prison, I would say, but it's within a community. And the other groups that we have in Indonesia is what we call independent refugees, or those who are not under IOM support, but they live like alongside Indonesian communities, being neighbors with Indonesian people, and they do or provide everything by themselves. So it depends really on the resources of the person. And how they become IOM supported or not is depending on whether they ask for support from IOM or immigration before, I think, 2016 or 2018, something like that. And just a fun fact that this IOM supported groups is actually a product of an agreement between Indonesia and Australia to stop refugees coming to Australia by boat. So that was a result of political agreement in which Australia provided funding for the Indonesian government through IOM. So that refugees stop coming to Australia. And I think there are a lot of implications of that kind of agreement, which we can talk about later, because I think this is kind of the climate that perhaps your government also are thinking to pursue in the UK. But anyway, going back to the placemaking action research. So in this research, we want to see whether this kind of connection with places were possible to to be used as a kind of encouraging, positive interaction between those two groups who were, never interacted before, even though they live, basically in the same area. We used three kinds of methodologies in here, experimental ones. That's why it's an action research. One is what we call kikigaki, which is a Japanese method that they use in Japan to sort of, pass on knowledge from experts to younger generation. Kikigaki literally means listen and write. So they listen to like people talking. It's basically like interview, and then you kind of write it down and then present it to people. And then the second methodology that we used in this research is called machiarki, or meaning town walking, which is quite close to ethnographic method of transect walk. So they were assigned an area, point A to point B, and they walked through the area, and they did like observation, asking, writing, marking on the maps of important places for them and things like that. And then the third one, we displayed the results of these exercises in a mini festival where participants can show, the results of these activities to local communities, and including the city mayor. If you see the mid picture there, it's like one participant was explaining about his neighborhood and what he wants to do in his neighborhood to the city mayor there. So it's a little bit similar with the Imagining Utopia thing, but this one is based on like actual neighborhood and actual data gathering in that neighborhood. The next project that I want to share is the Let's Walk My Journey art exhibition. I'm really fond of this project because I think this is why one of the reasons why we developed created UREF, which is amplifying voices of refugees and sort of bridging the connection between refugees and Indonesian public. So the goal of this art exhibition is to introduce, the issue of refugees and asylum seeking in Indonesian context, and introduce how how is the experience of being refugees and asylum seekers from the perspective of an everyday, everyday activities, not what they hear or see from the media. And so we had about 34, 35 artists from Indonesia, majority from Indonesia, all over Indonesia. And as you know, Indonesia is an archipelago. So refugees who live outside of Java, outside of Jakarta, cannot come to this exhibition because of the restriction of movement. There are restrictions of movement for refugees in Indonesia. But we also had, I think, two artists. One is an asylum seeker in Germany. She sent us a charcoal drawing from Germany, and then we had another one who is I think, Nigerian exile in Uganda. He also sent us like his writing. So I think this is like really cool opportunities for people to see, read, and interact directly with a lot of artists that also came to the exhibition. The last one is the Youth Mentorship Program, which is an in-house sort of project that we have in UREF. This is a voluntary project from everyone, facilitators, tutors, and everyone. And this is a product of the action research, the placemaking action research that we did in 2019, because at that time we realized that one of the main maybe disadvantage or missed opportunities for young people, young refugees, is the opportunities to have mentors or to have people to guide you through life. A lot of them came as an accompanied minors, so by themselves, either because their parents are still in Afghanistan, in Somalia, or wherever, or because their parents are not here with us anymore, so they are really like alone and they don't have anyone to kind of guide them through life. And so this mentorship program was designed to be, or to provide a structured learning environment for the mentees. We had 3 building blocks in this mentorship program. One is personal resilience, where they learn how to sort of deal with resilience issues, personal resilience, so trauma, also motivation, building habits, micro habits, and things like that. We have 2 transformational coach professional becoming the facilitators for these sessions. So I think this is also interesting. The other building block for this is literacy, or basic research skill, in which we sort of push the mentees to exercise, do some basic or very basic exercise of learning. The components are, reading, writing, presenting, speaking, something that you do usually in classes, but many of the mentees that we have are people who don't even pass or finish their middle school, because they had to flee, and so it was quite a difficult exercise for them, but I think it gave them a really strong, confidence after finishing the project. And then the last building block is the language and culture. We did all this program online. It's 100% online, and we did use a few tools like GatherTown. If you see the avatars over there, that's from GatherTown. And then we use Miro and all these kind of tools that are not quite familiar for them. Yeah, so that's the 3 projects that I wanted to share with you. And in developing this sharing of experience for you today, I was thinking about, whether I should talk a little bit of, my own reflection of what I have learned so far by working with refugees. And these are the keywords that came up to me. I don't remember now why I put them in here, but I'm just gonna pick a few that I feel is quite interesting. Maybe first is creativity, the sense of being creative, because you're all designers here, so it's one of, I think, the core asset or skills that you have to have. What I've come to learn is that for many youth refugees, the situation of being, in displacement, in forced displacement, has taken away one of the most valuable assets that should have been or could have been developed and nurtured in young or youth period, or like in adolescence or young adulthood, which is creativity, being creative. I think those who thrive in this situation are those who manage to keep the flame of creativity alive in them. And you know that to change yourself, to change the world, the system, you need to be creative, no? And it's so hard to think about, for example, a different way of futuring, a different future without, this sense of thinking outside of the box. Don't you agree? So that's probably why I feel like I'm drawn to expression of arts and literatures from young refugees in Indonesia. One is because that is probably one thing that they can do without restriction, because refugees in Indonesia cannot go to school, cannot move freely within the city, cannot do many things. Basically, a lot of their basic rights are not made not available for them, and so arts and writings, or like paintings, or sewing, making clothes, whatever that kind of outlet is I think one thing that they can access. And I also think that in producing the artworks or the literature works that they do, like my friend who wrote the book, they learn how to weave, like the title of this presentation, weave the past, the present, and the future, for them to be able to identify themselves in a more coherent way, to express who they are in a more coherent way. I think that kind of exercise really helped them to do that. The other thing that I would like to also kind of point it out is that the acknowledgement and the appreciation of these kind of creative products, and also the opportunity to amplify it, to show it to people, to Indonesians, for example, is what fuels the confidence in a person, and that creates a sense of belonging, and also that opens up the opportunity to connect with other people. And I think these keywords, confidence, connection, also trust, are the building blocks of resilience. I would like to think that the core of what I'm trying to do with my job is to build the sense of resilience in young people. But then the question is, what does being resilient means? How does being resilient look like? What action represents a person who is resilient or doesn't represent this kind of resilience, and how to not confuse resilience or not resilient enough with, for example, apathy or other kinds of different emotion, And I think resilience comes from within. And what we're trying to provide is the environment in which a person can thrive, and that can lead to a stronger sense of self, stronger sense of identity, and things like that. And the other things I think we can discuss if you have any questions on that, but I think I'd like to stop there. Maybe the things that I have in mind is really, when I think about you, all of you as a designer, is that the task of a designer is not just to design or to bring, to visualize or to bring this solution to people. It's really like all things, facilitating, mentoring, supporting, teaching, also being a student. And I think you would be the one who will or who should walk, the same pathway as the people that we're trying to work with. Sometimes we walk in front of them, sometimes behind them, but most of the times alongside of them. And so, this kind of connection between what we do and what other people want to have is, something that is important. So, as I would leave you with this question of what does it mean, what does being a designer means, and what is your role, and how are you going to do your job, particularly in an environment where power imbalances, represented by resources, knowledge, access, is so persistent and so pervasive in our society. I think I'd like to, before opening up the reflection or question session, I want to share one short videos that a good friend of mine made for showing, this sense of resilience, however you want to interpret it, in youth refugees. So let me just prepare it for a second here. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Nauruz Yusufi, 22 years old, Hazara refugee from Afghanistan, living in Makassar, Indonesia.
My name is Bishar, 22 years old, Hazara refugee from Afghanistan.
Hello, my name is Abdullah Hassani, 22 years old, Hazara refugee from Afghanistan.
When I first arrived in Indonesia, I feel safe, but at the same time, I feel lost. Living as a refugee is hard, but I try to be active, to do workout, to be positive as much as I can, to express myself, not to worry, not to stress. So I try to do workout.
Of course, I do have a lot of local friends, and I love them because they're really humble, friendly, It's through daily basis and sharing activities together, that's how we become friends. As a refugee, I'm a dreamer and I live by hope. One of my dreams and hope is to be a researcher somewhere and express my talent, my skill to the world and build my career. Together,
Be here, learn and shine.
Yes, thank you so much for listening to me rambling for about almost an hour. Please, if there's any question.
Thank you, Akino. That was a wonderful sharing. I don't know if you can see me. I think it was quite honest, the way that you evaluate the practices that and the methods that we were developing. I want to give a little bit of connection because I opened last session with kind of the theory behind our brief, and you came with the other side of how we did using these theories as an inspiration. So we have exactly the same brief as yours. How we imagine a mentoring and upskilling program, with this idea of the building blocks that you mentioned. The workshop that she described, Envision the Transition, it was thought as the first block. So in a program of 10 weeks, that will be the first session. So I think you did a really good end of the story. I also want to say that Loretta, the RA, and also just graduating from service design, is the RA of the UK part of the program, and she's going to run the workshop with you soon. I will share the invitations. So this is kind of making the map of what Akino comes. But I really like the way that you present what we designed and evaluated and reflect on this. Thank you very much. I'm going to open the floor for questions. You have to come here. Because that's how Akino is going to hear you.
This may take some time. Do I need to use the...
Yeah, if you just stand in front here.
Just stand here.
Just here?
Yeah.
Hello, Akino. Thank you very much. Oh, here, sorry. Thank you very much for a very interesting... Oh, you can see me. Hello. So I really enjoyed your presentation. I wanted to ask a bit more about what you talked about in the first half of the presentation. You talked about assessing different methods and talking a bit about what worked well and what didn't. So can you tell me a bit more about how you assessed what was going well and what wasn't?
This is a very good question, Lizzie. This is also part of our task. There is a lot of, and that question came last week as well with Francesca, no? How we measuring the impact and evaluate this. For me, some of the impact you cannot measure straight after the workshop. It comes like Akino said, some month later, or some 2 months later, someone call you and, you know, that day of the workshop that really changed my mind, and now I'm doing all of these things, you know. So sometimes the tools that we measure, that we use to measure or evaluate doesn't work. But also you can have a sense of the workshop, you know, what engaged, where you lost your people and all of that. But I left Akino answer.
Thank you, Malik. That's exactly what I wanted to say. I think with this workshop, the design of this workshop, what we wanted to focus on is whether the delivery of the way that we deliver the methods or the sessions are understandable enough by participants. So can participants understand what we want from them? taking a step back, I think, or maybe this is just my assumption, but in my experience, dreaming or imagining something that is maybe normal to us, but like something, a different reality for refugees in Indonesia is a very difficult thing to do. So when I discussed the design of this workshop with Archipelago co-facilitators, for example, everyone was skeptical because it's so hard to think about, what is an ideal future for us. Of course, resettlement, but life doesn't stop after resettlement, right? So it's very difficult to take people out of that mindset, and I think that's what we wanted to focus on, whether we can bring that people out of that mindset. But so evaluation as a way to measure impact or things like that, for me, is not the main goal for this workshop. We did a thorough evaluation process for the mentorship program that I described to you. So we had a pre-post assessments in the middle of the projects as well. We did a one-on-one interview. We had a 6 months post-program and 12 months post-program interview and questionnaires. We did all those, traditional kinds of evaluation, and because that was a deliberate practices that we want to have for this mentorship program, we designed it quite early on, I think, when designing the program as well. But I think that's not the focus for this Envision the Transition thing, or the Living Lab, and that is a big homework, I think, for us to do. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Any more questions?
Hi Akino, thank you for the talk. I had a question on how long was the mentorship program, and I think you mentioned that the mentorship program sort of came out of the placemaking. So between the placemaking and actually forming the mentorship program, could you talk a little about how you prepared the program itself? Like what would be right, what should be the, say, safeguarding, who would be the people who would contribute, who are the correct mentors, like how did you go about making choices like that? Thank you.
Thanks, thank you. I didn't get your name, but hello, nice to meet you. The mentorship program, so we started in 2022 for one batch, and then the second batch is in 2023, and then we're going to do another batch this year. It's actually part of a 3-year sort of pilot project for us to see whether this mentorship program works. The mentorship program itself runs for 16 weeks, so 4 months. With, I think usually we have about 2 or 3 months preparation in terms of selection and interviews. The first batch we have about 85 applicants, but we only receive 4 people, 4 mentees per batch. And that is because this program is fully voluntary, and we go very deep with each mentees for that. The first, as I mentioned, the first batch is in 2022, but we conceived the program since 2020. So we had 2 years of designing the programs. First of all, because we want to have quite a thorough sort of overview of what kind of mentorship programs are there, out there, available for refugees, particularly for refugees in Indonesia, that is not skill building, like entrepreneurial skill activities, because other organizations are doing that already. They provided, skills, hard skills to build their own business or things like that. But what we want to have in this mentorship program is a development of your inner, strengthening your own personal skills. This is something that I think also came out from my team's experience in youth development in general. So not necessarily refugees, but youth development sort of themes, with leadership, personal goal setting and things like that, which was not quite, there aren't many organizations in Indonesia that provided that kind of programs. We did a small study, consultancy with this great person that I know, who to understand, what is it, how do we make our mentorship program tailored for the needs of the youth refugees in Indonesia. We did that for I think about 6 months, and then after that we did an exercise to understand our own capacity in RDI and in URAF in developing 100% fully voluntary mentorship program. And I think we did quite well with the 8 mentees that we have so far. And I think with all of the URAF, you were asking about safeguarding. And I think in all of the URAF projects that we have, we always, be very careful of, publication. If you find out information in our social media, there are no information about the mentorship program, or there aren't many information about the mentorship program, because we don't put it out there just because we want this experience to be very personal and very, comfortable for participants. Consent is absolutely critical, and I think also, mentoring young people. These people are like 20, 21 years old. They're always on social media as well. And so, sort of navigating through what they think is important and what they think is necessary for other people to know is also, I think, something that we are quite careful about. I think, for the mentorship program, we provided scholarship for mentees to secure their time to learn, because many of them have to work to fulfill their daily needs, and so the scholarship was actually kind of in exchange of the sort of salary that they will get from work. And this scholarship was provided by individual donors, our friends and families who are interested in what we do and want to contribute, but they can contribute in a financial terms. And so we have several donors to fund the scholarship for the mentees. And for the rest of the team, like the facilitators, mentors, and whatever, I think it's really, they're volunteering their time because they feel, a genuine connection with the issue and with what we're trying to do. And it's almost like, you have time to volunteer in a charity organization. That's what they do with this program with us. I hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know.
Thank you, that was very clear. It helped. Thank you.
I was also thinking about the last question about the evaluation, and you were mentioning that some of our goal is kind of foster imaginations and foster alternative thinking and creativity. And I was reflecting on your answer, and it's amazing how the issue of imagining or the issue of creativity is so linked to privilege, and how us as designers in a super creative school, with the privilege to be here, we forget that. So I just wanted to rescue that point. I don't know if there are more questions from the floor. Yes,
is it okay?
Yeah. We have plenty of time, so bring your questions.
Hi Akino, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I also loved the visuals of the workshop and what you know, how you evaluated them. I thought it was really cool and really easy to understand. And I loved the walkthrough of the neighbourhood. I thought that's such a great idea. And I'd love to do something in my neighbourhood. It's like really inspiring me to think, oh, I'd love to, you know, get to know my neighbours more by doing something like that. But anyway, sorry. I wanted to ask, I've got a couple of questions, and I think they're kind of linked. So not so much about the mentorship program, because I think that I think it sounds like that's quite easy to communicate the value of that, maybe. But more the workshops. Like, did you have issues like kind of getting people to sign up for the workshop, and how did you communicate the value of doing something like that doesn't have a direct kind of outcome for the refugees?
Thank you. I didn't get your name as well, but thanks for the question. I think that's a really, really interesting question, because that's the first, I would say, not issues, but questions that we discuss with the co-facilitators. How are we getting, how do we get participants for this kind of workshop? And I don't know if this is an easy answer for us, URAF and Archipelago, or is it just our context? But we open up applications. Sorry, let me put it this way. So URAF has done a few projects before with young refugees, and we always attract applications for people. And the same with Archipelago. So Archipelago is quite well known as well in refugee communities. So in terms of like getting applications, it's not so difficult to do because we have already credentials among the refugee communities. But for this particular workshop, I was actually discussing with the Archipelago lead for this project, and we decided that we want to have specific person or specific type of profiles of the people who will join this workshop. And the reason being, again, coming back to the ability to think outside of the box. And that is maybe a cheating part from our side. But just speaking from experience from the placemaking research, for example, we went to a few accommodation in the city where we wanted to do the research. We met, a lot of young refugees, and it's probably a very unique situation in Indonesia, but it's difficult to get people's attention, not because they don't have time or they have to work or things like that. It's because they don't have motivation to live. They died inside probably, and so it's living is not a worth thing to do for them. So it's just getting that spark in the eye is quite a difficult thing. And so for this kind of workshop, I think there's specific profiles that we need in order to move things forward. And I agreed with Archipelago that we would try to identify a number of people to join this workshop. And if those people wants to recommend someone else or wants to invite someone else to the workshop, that's also very possible. And so that's what we did with the workshop. The second question, in terms of communicating values, I think everyone came, and honestly speaking, everyone came to the workshop knowing nothing. They don't know what they're going to do. We don't even know what we're going to do, So I feel like the first two sessions, the introduction and the value mappings, are very good in helping us to establish, who you are, where you stand, where I stand, do we have the same value? And then after that, it's sort of like, it doesn't really matter what we talk about, if we want to, because we can just connect, if we want to talk about the future, we can talk about the future in a way that, maybe not necessarily this workshop wants to go. And I also have to be honest with you that at the end of this workshop, everybody is still asking, why do we have this workshop? there's a one particular question from one participant who exactly asked the question, so what are we doing here? What do you expect us to gain from this workshop? And I didn't know the answer, so I asked another participant. And then the answer came out that, this workshop is trying to get us to think in a mindset of a change maker. And I think that's what we learned from this workshop. And so I feel like, yeah, that's probably the value that people see from this workshop. And we don't have to say it in the beginning or throughout the workshop. If they get it, everyone becomes, someone will get it and someone will share what he or she gained from this workshop. So I think, it's also quite an interesting process for me because I feel the natural need to tell people that this is what I want to do with you in this workshop. But this workshop forced me to do the other way around, which is I don't say it at all and I just ask people what they think they get from this workshop, and it worked really well. So I think it depends on how you want to design your own workshop, but maybe sometimes maybe you can experiment with, asking what people think they get from this, and sort of see whether they get what you want or not.
I gonna also complete the answer or add something. The question of how we communicate the value of the workshops was in internal project discussions from the beginning. We were starting the whole hypothesis, what if people that is in transit, people that is migrating, people that is refugees have lessons to give to our communities about transition. And then we start reading about transition, and we start reading around the theoretical legs, and it was questions. We have another RA, a research support in Indonesia called HAS, and HAS was saying, yeah, but the people have to want to be a change maker. They need to want to be a change maker, and that's a difficult one. If you are in a situation of trauma, if you are in a situation when you don't have basic rights or basic access to things, this is a quite difficult thing to want to be. And the question of how we communicate value was always there. And we were quite unsure if what we were proposing had any value. So that was our first question to answer at the end of every workshop, and this is basically what we was testing. And in that way, we gave you a brief that is quite risk, because we're still not totally sure. But I think there is a value. In the workshops that we did in the UK, they texted us, we did like an oral evaluation of that, and then they texted us during December and later on, saying, wow, this workshop helped me to start thinking really seriously about retaking my journalist practice, or start thinking really seriously about applying for a PhD in the UK. So there is a value there, there is a power of imagination, there is a power of thinking about a change maker, but it's quite hard to touch. It's quite hard to encapsulate it, and it's quite hard to sell it. So the issue of recruitment, how we recruit and how we invite participants, is being constant in our project. We are working with an organization with you called Revoke that is recruiting the participants, and also I have to communicate what's the value of your interventions to the organization, and the organization has to translate that to the participants, and we are paying participants to come to the workshops, so there is a value there that at least in that hour they don't have to work. But it's an issue. I don't know, for example, a workshop of change making, you could say that we're going to use a similar method that you will use in a consultancy, in an organization. or in a summer school, in academia. They are super expensive, these courses. And the fact that we also pay participants to do this is kind of super counterintuitive. But obviously, if they don't have that hours pay, they will have to work. And the type of jobs that they have, they get paid per hour. So it is a tricky thing about how we communicate value, who is participating, how we recruit, safeguarding and ethics of these interventions. At the end, we are testing if our ideas that come from theory can be practiced, if there is value for them. So that's the risk that I was talking last week. But I think we're taking it. I don't know if you want to add something else, Akino, or if you heard me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I just want to add, this just came up to my mind when I heard you speaking just now, Male, in terms of communicating value. I feel that the best way to communicate the value is just communicate yourself. You being authentic with yourself, with your values, is the best way to communicate what you want to do with these people. And I really believe that, change making or change makers is it's an energy attraction, sort of. You attract people who wants to be in that space with you and doing what you want to do. And I was also thinking in the beginning, in terms of like recruiting participants, is to use the snowballing technique we usually use it for interviews, is just find that one person and then let that one person find another person for you. It may be very, subjective, but that's okay for the beginning, right? So that's what we did with the archipelago, that's what we did with these participants. That's what we did with the mentorship program as well, although we did have an open recruitment for that one. But in the end, the people who joined the program are apparently those who, know each other very well outside of the program. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Well,
really
I want to rescue this thing about communicating yourself and where you're coming from, because I think it's a great idea. We've been talking in this project about imagining design that is not a neutral practice, but is spiritual and political. And I always, when I was designing these workshops, I said the reasons why I'm working here. I'm working here because Venezuela is in a refugee crisis, and I'm Venezuela, and I need to start to do something somewhere. And I think that immediately, boom. I open myself and my politics and my spirituality and my nationality and my interest right there. And I think that was always my door in. Obviously, each of us in the team have a different reason why we're doing this. But I think explaining your own value is a very good door. So thank you, Akino.
And I think
Go.
So I'm just adding a comment.
No, but
Okay,
it's
yeah,
good
she
to
can't
get
hear
a
me.
record.
Okay.
Also, she can hear you.
Okay. Hi.
Name and
I'm Tahir, and I'm from Design Management, MA Design Management. So I just wanted to add that I think when we started talking about this lab, the whole idea is to really transfer the power, not to think of ourselves as giving power to them, but it's more like learning from them, like what they've been through. And I think this narrative really needs to shift because they're in transition, they've been through so much, and still they have the kind of resilience. Like Malya was talking about how creativity is a privilege. We can sit and imagine, and you use that term futurizing. And I think it is definitely a privilege, but still if you meet refugees, it just starts with listening. I think if you're there to listen, they just open up. They're and they have so much to show. So I think it's about changing that narrative where we think that we're making them change makers. I don't think it's like that. I think it's in them, and it's just our way of designing and creating something and trying to say that, okay, we're working with them, but I think power lies with them. So really being mindful of giving them the power and maybe enabling them. That's it. Like, if that's the, I think, maximum we can be, I think, as a catalyst, but the whole reaction is going to come from them. One thing I wanted to ask you was, what was the most challenging thing for you, like, in all of this? It could be personal, it could be related to this project. And if you have to do it again, like, if there's one thing which you think you would want to do different.
Thank you, Sahar. Let me just pick up from the creativity is a privilege. And I completely agree with that. I just realized that actually just minutes before this presentation, that I just started my sort of new hobby to draw and whatever. And I thought, like, you know, I don't understand why I didn't do this before, because I do have the privilege of doing this. And like my friends who are refugees, you know, they have very limited situations, and they started, you know, do all these kind of art drawings, crafts things and whatever. And it's just kind of click in my mind that, you know, the way you see privilege is probably, you know, different. The way we understand what privilege is probably a little bit different. And so I thought, oh my God, I just realized, yes, it's a privilege, but it doesn't have to have anything to do with your situation, really. It's something that it's a privilege to just realize, you know, that you have it in you, for example, to do whatever you want to do. The other thing that I also want to pick up from your comments is we started with communication, we started with listening, right? And this, I think, relates to your question on the most challenging thing. I think for me is to build trust. You know, because to communicate, to talk with people that you've never met before, you need to trust them at some level, yeah. I think in the beginning, the most difficult thing for me is physically is to be in the same space with someone that I really want to talk with, but I get this very painful stare from them, like the way they look at me as a representation of the world that they cannot, that has done very cruel things to them, you know. So it's very difficult to cross that trust threshold, I would say, for people, for us to be able to talk, you know, just like usual conversation. And I understand that completely, you know, because it's difficult to trust everything when the world has been so cruel to you, right? And so I learned that, you know, being able to trust is perhaps when you have that, you know, moments where you start to have, you know, just usual mundane conversation with a person, with the young refugees that you're trying to work with. I think that's already opening up so many doors and opportunities for whatever it is in the future for them. The other thing that I find most challenging when I started this work is that I feel like my world is kind of upside down now, because my background is in urban planning. Yeah, we don't talk about refugees in urban planning at all. It's like international politics, relations, things, right? And so I would say I lost connections with the world that I knew before. It's so difficult to, for example, I wanted to talk about, you know, how we, you know, for example, talk about infrastructure, arrival infrastructure for refugees in Indonesia, and that you have to do with planners, city planners. But just, I met my friends who were like asking these questions of, what are you doing with refugees, you know? So it's, I feel like I need to, I was pushed, or I'm still pushed, to get to know what is it that I want to do with this project, with this topic. Why do I keep pushing on working on this topic? And I think it's a daily conversation with myself in terms of what is it that I value the most that I want to express in working with young refugees. And I feel like I'm very blessed, very privileged to know many young refugees from the projects that I mentioned to you before, because they keep reminding me that, I'm still in kindergarten, I haven't learned anything, like not so many things yet. And that's, I think, is the challenging thing, is like you need to be ready to do something that is completely different with what you are familiar and comfortable with.
Wow, what an answer. How beautiful. Francesco was saying last week, be ready to dump everything that you know in design. To be honest, since I'm working with Akino in this project, my whole world in design also is ups and downs. I've been saying to my friends and son that I'm being radicalized, but actually I have been pushed out of design into something else. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's this utopian thinking, maybe because what we do is very far from typical or what I do in my last projects before I started working here. So this idea of change making started with us. we thought we're gonna do change making with people, but actually it's changing us, it's changing me. And what we've been talking now that the project is gonna end in this summer and what we're gonna do next, and I don't think it's way back, for me at least. So I think this idea of dumping everything, the own learning in order to approach the other, it also changes you. And that's why, even though this is a very risky brief, that's why I decided to teach with it, because we have to start doing things differently. Any more questions or comments? If this is it, I want to give a very big Akino and me are working very closely for the last maybe 2 years, and so you know how cool are my collaborators. The other person that has been key in this project is Christine Mortimer, and she's from Lancaster University Management School, and she's doing a workshop on Thursday afternoon that you are all invited. If you are not from service design or design management, please email her. Her contact is in Moodle. But if you are in service design or design management, don't email me. Sorry, Akino, it's a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you for staying until very late with us, and thank you for coming. And we have the last and next talk next week of this program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.